Diane Carter had spent 8 years walking the same hallways. 8 years of early mornings. 8 years of overnight shifts. 8 years of missed holidays, rushed lunches, and exhausted drives home after 14-hour days. She had comforted families on the worst days of their lives. She had sat beside frightened patients when there was nothing left to do except hold a hand and promise they weren't alone. She had memorized medication schedules, patient histories, and the names of children who came to visit their parents after school. To most people at Meridian General Hospital, Diane Carter wasn't just a nurse. She was one of the people who kept the place running. The kind of employee every organization claims to value but rarely notices until she's gone. And then she got pregnant. At first, nothing seemed different. Her performance remained flawless. Her patient satisfaction scores remained among the highest in the department. She showed up on time. She completed every assignment. She carried out every responsibility expected of her. But not everyone saw her pregnancy as good news. One person saw it as a problem. That person was Dr. Marcus Hale. One Tuesday morning, in less than 4 minutes, everything changed. Standing in a hospital corridor, with coworkers watching from only a few feet away, Diane Carter was informed that her employment was being terminated effective immediately. No private office. No dignity. No discussion. Just humiliation. Marcus Hale believed he had solved a problem. He believed he had removed an inconvenience. He believed he had reminded everyone exactly who held the power. What he didn't know was that the woman he had just fired wasn't simply a nurse. She owned the hospital. And within days, his entire world would begin to unravel. Because some mistakes cost more than people realize. And some people are far more powerful than they appear. This is the story of Diane Carter and Dr. Marcus Hale. And before this story is over, you'll understand why the most dangerous person in any room is often the one everyone overlooks. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from today. And if you've ever been underestimated at work, let us know in the comments. Now let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened that Tuesday morning, you first need to understand the man who thought he was untouchable. If you asked patients about Dr. Marcus Hale, most of them would tell you he was a hero. And in many ways, he was. He had spent nearly 2 decades building a reputation as one of the most respected cardiothoracic surgeons in Georgia. His name carried weight. Patients requested him specifically. Hospital administrators praised him. Medical conferences invited him to speak. You didn't become Dr. Marcus Hale by accident. You became him through talent. And Marcus Hale had talent in abundance. From an early age, people told him he was exceptional. He graduated near the top of every class he attended. He excelled academically. He excelled professionally. And eventually he excelled financially. By the time he joined Meridian General Hospital, he had already built the kind of career many physicians spend a lifetime chasing. His surgical outcomes were impressive. His success rate was among the best in the state. And his confidence reflected it. At least in the beginning. But confidence has a strange relationship with power. For some people, power sharpens humility. For others, it slowly erodes it. And somewhere along the way, Marcus Hale stopped seeing coworkers as colleagues. He began seeing them as obstacles, or assistants, or people whose sole purpose was making his life easier. Nurses felt it first. New hires quickly learned the rules. Don't challenge him. Don't correct him publicly. Don't disagree with him during rounds. And whatever you do, don't make him look bad. Because Marcus Hale never forgot a slight. Even one that existed only in his imagination. Former staff members often described him as 2 different people. In front of hospital executives, he was charming, professional, polished. He remembered birthdays, asked about families, volunteered for committees. He knew exactly how to present himself to people whose opinions mattered. But on the floor, away from administrators and board members, a different version emerged. A colder version. A harsher version. One that interrupted nurses mid-sentence, dismissed concerns without listening, and made people feel small simply because he could. Over time, an atmosphere formed around him. Not respect. Fear. The difference between those two things is enormous. Respect inspires loyalty. Fear inspires silence. And silence had protected Marcus Hale for years. Nurses who transferred departments rarely spoke publicly about why they left. Residents learned to keep their heads down. Complaints disappeared into administrative systems that never seemed to produce consequences. Marcus always emerged untouched, as if the rules applied to everyone except him. But there was another pattern people noticed, one that bothered many staff members far more than his arrogance. Marcus Hale had a particular dislike for pregnant employees. He never hid it. He referred to maternity leave as a staffing burden. He complained about scheduling accommodations. He openly questioned whether pregnant nurses could maintain the same level of performance. Most people knew those comments were inappropriate. Some knew they were discriminatory. But nobody challenged him directly, because challenging Marcus Hale came with risks. And most people couldn't afford those risks. For years, that behavior continued unchecked. Then Diane Carter became pregnant. And for the first time, Marcus Hale chose the wrong target. The problem for Marcus wasn't that Diane was incompetent. She wasn't. The problem wasn't that she was lazy. She wasn't. The problem wasn't even that she made mistakes. Because everyone makes mistakes. The real problem was that Diane Carter possessed something Marcus Hale never understood. Patience. The kind of patience that allows someone to play a much longer game than the people around them realize. And while Marcus believed he was building a case against Diane, Diane was quietly gathering information about him. Information that would eventually change everything. If Marcus Hale was the kind of person who announced his presence the moment he entered a room, Diane Carter was the exact opposite. She never sought attention. She never chased recognition. And she certainly never talked about herself. Most of her coworkers knew only the basics. They knew she had worked at Meridian General for 8 years. They knew she was one of the most dependable nurses in the cardiac unit. What they didn't know was how different Diane's life looked outside those hospital walls. Diane had grown up in Decatur, Georgia, raised by a mother who spent 3 decades working as a nurse. From an early age, she learned something many people never do. Being useful mattered more than being important. Her mother used to tell her that titles came and went. Money came and went. But character stayed. Those lessons followed Diane into adulthood. They shaped how she treated patients, how she handled conflict, and eventually how she handled success. Because success arrived in a way nobody could have predicted. Years earlier, after the death of her grandfather Walter Carter, Diane inherited a parcel of land outside Savannah. Most people saw an empty field. Diane saw potential. Instead of selling it immediately, she waited. Years passed. Development spread. Demand increased. And eventually the value of that land exploded. The sale changed her financial future overnight. But Diane didn't spend recklessly. She invested. Carefully. Patiently. Methodically. While most people celebrated quick wins, Diane focused on long-term growth. One investment became another. One opportunity led to the next. And over time she built something extraordinary. Not through luck. Not through shortcuts. Through discipline. Then came an opportunity that immediately caught her attention. Meridian General Hospital. The very hospital where she worked. The facility was struggling financially. Ownership groups were looking for a buyer. Diane leaned in. After months of research and consultation, she quietly purchased controlling ownership through a holding company. The transaction remained confidential. Even hospital executives didn't know who the ultimate owner was. And Diane wanted it that way. She wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity owner. She wanted something else. The truth. She wanted to know what happened inside those walls when nobody knew she was watching. So she kept showing up in scrubs. Shift after shift. Listening. Observing. Learning. And what she discovered wasn't always encouraging. Especially when it came to Marcus Hale. Because the deeper Diane looked, the more she realized the hospital's biggest problems weren't financial. They were cultural. And culture always starts with people. Unfortunately, one of the most influential people in the building was also one of its biggest problems. And soon their paths would collide. When Diane announced her pregnancy, most people were thrilled. Coworkers hugged her. Patients congratulated her. Even some doctors who barely knew her stopped to offer kind words. For a brief moment, everything felt hopeful. Then Marcus Hale found out. The change wasn't dramatic at first. It rarely is. People like Marcus understood that obvious discrimination attracts attention. So he moved carefully, quietly, methodically. The first signs were subtle. Diane stopped receiving invitations to meetings she had always attended. Patient assignments changed without explanation. Important information reached her later than everyone else. Small things, individually insignificant, collectively impossible to ignore. Then came the criticism. Suddenly every decision was questioned, every action examined, every minor oversight documented. Other nurses noticed immediately. Several spoke privately about what was happening. But nobody felt powerful enough to intervene. Marcus controlled too much. He had influence, connections, protection. Most employees believed challenging him would only damage their own careers. Meanwhile, Diane remained calm. She documented everything, every interaction, every incident, every unusual decision. Not because she planned revenge, because she believed facts mattered. And facts have a way of becoming valuable later. As weeks passed, Marcus grew bolder. He began excluding her publicly, correcting her unnecessarily, speaking to her with a level of disrespect that shocked even longtime staff members. Yet Diane never reacted emotionally. That frustrated him even more, because bullies thrive on reaction, and Diane refused to provide one. What Marcus didn't understand was that every attempt to push her out only strengthened the case against him, a case he didn't even realize was being built. Then came the Tuesday morning neither of them would ever forget. The day began like hundreds before it. The hospital was busy. Phones rang. Monitors beeped. Patients waited. Staff hurried through hallways carrying charts and coffee cups. Diane arrived before sunrise, reviewed patient notes, checked medication schedules, prepared for another long shift. Nothing felt unusual, at least not yet. Then, just before 8 o'clock, people began noticing movement near the nursing station. Marcus Hale had left his office. Beside him walked an HR representative carrying a folder. Several nurses exchanged nervous glances. Something felt wrong. Marcus wasn't smiling. The HR representative looked uncomfortable. And both were walking directly toward Diane. The hallway gradually fell silent. Diane looked up from her workstation. Marcus stopped a few feet away, without asking to speak privately, without requesting a meeting, without showing even basic courtesy. He began reading from prepared paperwork. Performance concerns, departmental standards, professional deficiencies. The accusations sounded official, but everyone standing nearby knew they weren't true. Several nurses later admitted they were stunned. Others were angry. Nobody spoke. Fear had trained them well. Then Marcus delivered the final sentence. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately." The words echoed through the hallway. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Diane simply looked at him, calmly. Then she asked a single question. "You're sure about this?" Marcus barely hesitated. "Absolutely." Those would become some of the most expensive words he ever spoke. A security officer eventually arrived. Diane packed her belongings, accepted the envelope, and walked out. No shouting, no tears, no scene. The sliding glass doors closed behind her, and Marcus returned to his office feeling victorious. He thought the situation was over. In reality, it had only just begun. Outside, Diane sat inside her car. Minutes passed. She stared through the windshield, processing everything. Then she picked up her phone and called the one person who understood exactly what this moment meant. When Gerald Thompson answered, she spoke 4 simple words. "It's time. Move forward." Everything changed after that call. The following week felt different. Rumors spread throughout Meridian General. Questions multiplied. Employees whispered in hallways. Coworkers submitted complaints. People began comparing notes. The firing didn't sit right with anyone. Then a legal notice arrived. Emergency board meeting required. Attendance mandatory. Executives were confused. Board members were concerned. Marcus Hale wasn't worried. Why would he be? He assumed the issue involved Diane's complaint. Maybe HR. Maybe legal review. Nothing serious. At least that's what he believed. On the morning of the meeting, Marcus entered the boardroom carrying his usual confidence. The same confidence that had protected him for years. Board members filled their seats. Attorneys reviewed documents. Executives exchanged uncertain looks. Then the door opened, and Diane Carter walked in. Not wearing scrubs. Not carrying patient charts. Not looking like a nurse reporting for duty. She wore professional business attire. Beside her stood an attorney. Both carried portfolios. Marcus frowned. Confusion crossed his face. Then documents were distributed. Ownership records. Corporate filings. Acquisition agreements. Legal certifications. Board members reviewed page after page. The truth emerged rapidly. The owner of Meridian General Hospital. The controlling stakeholder. The person ultimately responsible for the institution. Was Diane Carter, the nurse he had fired. Silence filled the room. Marcus stared at the paperwork. Then at Diane. Then back at the paperwork. For perhaps the first time in his professional life, he had no response. No explanation. No authority. No control. Only consequences. And they were coming quickly. The investigation began immediately. Years of complaints resurfaced. Witnesses spoke openly. Former employees came forward. Patterns emerged. The board discovered behavior that had remained hidden behind reputation and influence for far too long. Within weeks, Marcus Hale was gone. No public celebration followed. No dramatic confrontation occurred. His departure was quiet, which somehow made it even more final. Meanwhile, Diane got to work. She strengthened employee protections, improved reporting systems, expanded oversight procedures, implemented new safeguards for pregnant workers, and perhaps most importantly, she changed the culture. Because culture isn't created by mission statements. It's created by behavior, by expectations, by leadership. Months later, Diane welcomed a healthy baby girl into the world. Then she returned to work. Not as an executive hidden behind an office door, but as the same nurse her patients already knew. The same nurse she had always been. One day a coworker asked why she had stayed silent for so long. Why she hadn't revealed her ownership earlier. Why she allowed events to go as far as they did. Diane thought for a moment before answering. Then she said, "Because I needed to know what kind of place this was when nobody thought I had any power." That answer revealed everything. This story isn't memorable because Diane owned a hospital. It's memorable because she understood power differently. She didn't use it to impress people. She used it to understand them. Marcus Hale looked at Diane Carter and saw a pregnant nurse. Problem. An inconvenience. Someone he could easily remove. What he failed to see was the person beneath the title. And sometimes that's the most dangerous mistake anyone can make. Because the people we underestimate often know far more than we imagine. They carry strengths we cannot see, influence we don't recognize, and futures we never bother to consider. The next time you find yourself tempted to judge someone by their position, appearance, or circumstances, remember Diane Carter. Remember the hallway. Remember the boardroom. And remember how quickly power changes hands when arrogance blinds us to reality. Now tell us in the comments, which moment shocked you most? The public firing? The phone call in the parking lot? Or the moment the ownership documents landed on that boardroom table? And if you've ever been underestimated, we'd love to hear your story too. Because sometimes the people nobody notices are the very people changing everything. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.